The story begins by showing two brothers belonging to the Mason family, namely Joe, the eldest, and Danny, the youngest. They are shown hunting deer in a vast grassland. After a successful hunt, they quickly head towards their car, intending to return home. During this time, Danny inquires about their brother Roy, who has been absent for several months. Joe expresses his frustration with Roy's rebellious behavior, especially after leaving the military and choosing to pursue a career as an MMA fighter, even getting involved with a mafia boss. Later that evening, at a nightclub, Roy is seen engaging in a fight in front of influential guests. Just moments before the match begins, he takes a moment to kiss his girlfriend, who has come to watch the fight. Eventually, the fight commences, and Roy's skills enable him to dominate his opponent. Feeling confident in his impending victory, he approaches his girlfriend, who is seated near the fighting area. Unfortunately, at that very moment, his opponent recovers and brutally defeats Roy, leaving him severely battered. As a result, Roy's opponent claims victory. Upon witnessing Roy's defeat, his mob boss, Julian, becomes infuriated. Julian meets with Roy to express his frustration, believing that Roy lacked focus during the fight. Julian had invested a substantial amount of money in Roy, hoping he would become his prized fighter. However, due to the defeat, Julian suffers significant financial losses as he had wagered millions of dollars on the outcome. Shortly after, Julian's men unexpectedly bring in Roy's girlfriend, and without hesitation, Julian kills her in front of Roy. Julian proceeds to bring Roy to his concealed headquarters, intending to assign him with a task of transporting a rare diamond worth $50 million to a specific location. Julian offers a reward of $1 million if Roy successfully accomplishes the mission. Puzzled, Roy questions why Julian doesn't assign his men to carry out the task. Julian explains that apart from Roy's driving skills, his debt incurred from compensating for his previous fight defeat and the presence of Joe, Roy's tough older brother, led Julian to believe that Roy is the right person for the job. However, Julian insists on guarantees regarding the safety of Joe's wife and children as collateral in case Roy fails or attempts to keep the diamond, since Roy himself does not have a spouse or children. Upon hearing this, Roy becomes pessimistic as his relationship with Joe is strained. He tries to reach out to Joe, but Joe, still upset with him, chooses not to answer Roy's call. The following day, Danny, an army soldier, is seen at the military base. His friend invites him to watch a basketball game during their upcoming days off, but Danny declines, stating that he cannot attend because Joe has asked for his assistance in managing the family farm. After finishing work, Danny heads to the family farm located behind Joe's house. Upon arrival, Joe informs Danny that Roy contacted him the previous night, but Joe intentionally ignored the call. Despite being aware of the strained relationship between Joe and Roy in recent years, Danny suggests that Joe should have answered the call, as Roy might be in need of Joe's help. Shortly after, as Danny changes into his army uniform, a truck driven by Roy arrives at Joe's house. Roy's presence is met with warm greetings from Joe's wife and their two daughters, as Roy has been away for quite some time. Danny observes his older brother's arrival and quickly heads to the back of the farm to inform Joe and urge him to meet Roy. However, Joe refuses and suspects that Roy has come seeking help with another troublesome situation, further deepening his disappointment in Roy, particularly due to his involvement with being an MMA fighter for a mafia boss. Unexpectedly, Roy overhears Joe's words, and the two brothers engage in another heated argument. Eventually, Roy decides to leave the premises. Danny immediately chases after Roy, urging him not to dwell on Joe's harsh words. In that moment, Roy offers Danny the opportunity to accompany him on a delivery outside the city in the upcoming days. He reveals that he initially planned to invite Joe, but given Joe's strong animosity towards him, he discouraged the idea. Hearing this, Danny feels a sense of happiness and willingly agrees to join Roy, considering he also has a few days off from his military duties. During their journey, Danny mentions that Joe actually still cares about Roy, but struggles to express it properly. Danny expresses his curiosity about the goods they are delivering, and Roy explains that they will pick up the goods from a warehouse the following day. Later that night, after covering a significant distance, Roy takes Danny to an underground fighting arena owned by one of his acquaintances. They witness a fighter named Big Duke showcasing his formidable fighting skills, effortlessly defeating opponents with only a few strikes. Intrigued by Big Duke's abilities, Roy, who had previously defeated him, becomes interested and offers to fight him once again. Big Duke, eager to avenge his previous loss, accepts the challenge. However, when the fight begins, Roy effortlessly overpowers Big Duke, emerging victorious once more. The following morning, Roy and Danny continue their journey towards the warehouse, where Roy is scheduled to retrieve the diamonds. Upon their arrival, Roy steps out of the truck and makes his way into the warehouse, while Danny patiently waits for his older brother. Inside the warehouse, Roy is met by Paulie, Julian's trusted associate. Paulie informs Roy that the diamonds have been carefully concealed in a bottle to avoid arousing suspicion from law enforcement. Before Roy departs with the diamonds, Paulie warns him to exercise caution and ensure the safe delivery. Paulie emphasizes that if Roy fails to deliver the diamonds to their intended destination, Joe's wife and daughters will become targets of Julian's wrath. After a while, Roy and Danny resume their journey towards the destination where the diamond must be delivered. As they drive, the fuel in their truck begins to run low. They decide to make a stop at a gas station to refuel and take a short break. Roy and Danny enter the convenience store at the gas station to purchase some drinks and use the restroom. However, their peaceful moment is abruptly shattered when a group of thieves arrives in 3 cars and launches a sudden attack on the gas station. They storm into the convenience store, violently targeting the customers and staff. Tragically, even the security guards who attempt to defend the store are shot and killed. The robbers swiftly seize the truck carrying the diamond and make their escape, leaving chaos in their wake. Witnessing the incident, Danny and Roy quickly decide to pursue the robbers using the car of the deceased convenience store owner. During the intense chase, Danny seizes the opportunity to inquire about the nature of the goods Roy was entrusted to deliver. However, Roy avoids answering his younger brother's question, keeping the information to himself. Aware of being pursued, the robbers retaliate by opening fire on Roy and Danny. In response, Roy attempts to fight back, but the overwhelming number of attackers forces them to abandon the damaged car and continue the pursuit on foot. As they navigate through the chaos, Danny persistently asks Roy about the contents of the truck. Finally, Roy reveals that he is transporting diamonds valued at $50 million, destined for Julian. During the night, Julian receives information from his men, indicating that Roy has failed to reach the designated delivery point, leading him to suspect that Roy may have absconded with the diamond. Meanwhile, Danny and Roy find themselves resting in the middle of a remote savanna where there is no phone signal, far away from any inhabited areas. The following day, the group of robbers, who successfully obtained the diamond, rendezvous at a predetermined location to meet with Paulie, the mastermind behind the heist. Paulie plans to shift the blame for the diamond's disappearance onto Roy, portraying him as the culprit. In the meantime, Joe returns home with gifts, and he is shocked to discover his house in ruins and is unable to locate his wife and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, Roy and Danny continue their journey in search of a phone signal, hoping to call for assistance. After hours of walking, they finally find a signal, and to their surprise, Julian contacts Roy. Julian sternly warns Roy not to have taken the diamond away, to which Roy explains that the diamond was stolen by a group of individuals. However, Julian appears unconcerned about the explanation and gives Roy a strict deadline of 48 hours to recover and return the diamond. If Roy fails, Julian threatens to harm Joe's kidnapped wife and daughters. Shortly after, Danny receives a call from Joe, who informs him about the kidnapping of his family. Upon hearing this, Roy finally reveals the whole situation to Joe, enraging him further at the fact that Roy has put his family in danger. Joe demands to know the whereabouts of Roy and Danny. Prior to setting out to meet his younger brothers, Joe visits his farm and unearths a secret room where he had stored various weapons. Before taking on the responsibility of running the family farm, Joe served as part of the special forces in the American military. He carefully selects a few weapons and gathers ammunition before hastily departing. Meanwhile, Danny harbors a deep anger towards Roy for involving Joe's family in his troubles. However, as the afternoon sets in, Danny approaches Roy and offers his apologies for his previous harsh words and actions. He realizes that unity and cooperation are crucial in their current situation. After an intense and sleepless night, Joe finally reaches the location where Roy and Danny are waiting. Without hesitation, Joe confronts Roy and demands to know who kidnapped his family. Roy reveals that Julian is the likely culprit who has taken Joe's wife and daughters to his residence. Determined to rescue his family, Joe, Roy, and Danny immediately set off towards Julian's location. Arriving at their destination the following day, the three brothers launch a covert operation, swiftly neutralizing several guards stationed at the premises. Joe then instructs Roy to enter the house, while Danny takes on the role of a sniper, eliminating guards from a safe distance. In a surprising turn of events, Paulie arrives at the location and enters Julian's room without permission. Julian, who was enjoying himself with a woman, becomes visibly annoyed as he had previously mentioned that Paulie shouldn't disturb him when he's with someone. However, Paulie disregards Julian's words and pulls out a gun, killing the woman who was with Julian. Paulie declares his intention to kill Julian, asserting that Julian is unworthy of the position of Mafia chairman and that it rightfully belongs to him. Their conversation reveals that prior to Julian's rise to power, the position of Mafia chairman belonged to Paulie's uncle. However, due to his uncle entrusting all affairs to Julian, the position ultimately fell into Julian's hands. A furious Paulie also admits to being the mastermind behind the diamond robbery. When Joe and Roy methodically eliminate the guards within the house, a commotion catches Paulie's attention from behind the door of Julian's room. Seizing the opportunity, Julian swiftly attacks Paulie, engaging in a fierce struggle. Joe enters the room and a tense standoff ensues as both Joe and Julian point their weapons at each other. Julian challenges Joe to a hand-to-hand duel, confident in his close-quarters combat skills. Unfortunately, Julian's superior fighting ability quickly overwhelms Joe, leaving him incapacitated. Despite Roy's attempt to intervene and assist Joe, Julian swiftly defeats him as well, causing Roy to collapse. At the same time, Paulie, who had previously been unconscious, regains consciousness and takes advantage of the chaos. He shoots both Joe and Julian, ending their lives in a tragic turn of events. A short while later, Julian's men enter the room where the altercation took place, and Paulie falsely accuses Joe of killing Julian. He instructs his men to take Roy to Paulie's headquarters, where they used to convene. Unbeknownst to them, Joe survives the encounter as the shot from Paulie only struck his bulletproof vest. Joe immediately reunites with Danny to inform him about Roy's kidnapping and his location at Paulie's headquarters. Danny, being aware of the location, wastes no time in urging Joe to join him in rescuing their brother. During their journey, Danny contacts his fellow soldier James, who helps prepare a variety of ammunition and weapons. They pick up James, who has gathered a range of weaponry, and the trio proceeds towards Paulie's headquarters, located in a nearby mine, not far from James' residence. In a grim scene, Paulie subjects Roy to torture at the mine where Joe's wife and daughters are also being held captive. Paulie proposes a deadly challenge, offering Roy a chance to fight against one of his most skilled men. If Roy emerges victorious, Paulie promises to release one of Joe's daughters. However, if Roy fails, Paulie threatens to execute Joe's wife and 2 daughters without hesitation. During this tense moment, Paulie shares the story of how he stumbled upon the diamond mine by chance while engaging in explosive activities with a friend. They discovered diamond fragments, but Paulie's greed led him to murder his friend in order to claim sole ownership of the mine and its profits. When Paulie orders his men to attack Roy, the exhausted Roy finds himself unable to effectively defend against their assault. He becomes overwhelmed and cornered by Paulie's men. Meanwhile, Joe, Danny, and their team have been outside the mine area, engaging in a fierce battle against Paulie's guards. In a display of determination, Roy refuses to give up and musters the strength to rise and turn the tide of the fight. He manages to gain the upper hand by locking his opponent in a chokehold. During this critical moment, Joe and Danny successfully infiltrate the area, launching their attack on Paulie's men. However, outside the mine, James, who was assigned as a sniper, falls victim to one of Paulie's men, leaving him paralyzed and unable to fulfill his role. In the meantime, as Roy attempts to rescue Joe's wife and 2 daughters, Joe manages to corner Paulie, who was on the verge of escaping. However, just as Joe is about to pull the trigger, he realizes that the bullet inside his gun has run out, forcing him to engage in a physical confrontation with Paulie. In the decisive moment before Joe can deliver the final blow, 2 detectives arrive at the scene and intervene, putting a halt to the fight. With the arrival of the authorities, Paulie is finally apprehended along with his gang of mobsters, fulfilling the long-standing pursuit by the FBI. After Joe and the others are rescued, the detective expresses gratitude to all of them for their assistance in capturing Paulie and his men. In the concluding scenes of the film, Roy makes the decision to leave behind his life as an MMA fighter and joins Joe in managing the family farm business. Amidst their busy schedules, Roy is shown spending quality time with his 2 brothers, riding around the farm as they did during their childhood days, forging a renewed bond and finding solace in their shared memories. The film concludes with a sense of closure and a hopeful outlook for the future as the brothers reunite and prioritize their family and the farm, embracing a life of unity and resilience. The moral of the story is that sometimes, even in the midst of intense situations, it's important to remember to double-check your ammo and make sure you have enough bullets before engaging in a fight. And never forget to embrace the silliness, ride around on imaginary farm tractors, and create moments of pure, lighthearted fun with your siblings. Life is too short to take ourselves too seriously.